Hi, I received an email from a student today. They were asking me about some Python code. I don't normally do this, but yeah, I had a look and I couldn't resist making a little video because there's a few things here. The question was, why does the code not work? There's a few things here which I think are interesting, possibly quite useful to some other students in the class. So yeah, anyway, so I'm going to make a hopefully quick video. I reckon it's probably going to take about 10 minutes. So we're going to look at this code and see what the problem is. In fact, I think there are a few problems going on. Right, okay, let's just try running the code. So I just hit F5. Please enter your name. So yeah, so what's happening here? We are going to be calling the main subroutine. There's a definition of the main subroutine, and in the main subroutine, first line of it is a call to the input function, which is then going to prompt the user to enter something, and then it's going to return a string, which is then going to be assigned to the variable name. So let's enter a name. Doesn't matter what we do, so let's just do default. Okay, so we've got error messages there, and you'll see that it gives you some line numbers which are important. So if you haven't done so previously, you might be you might find it useful to know that you can hide and show line numbers like that. Okay, so I'm going options and then show line numbers. And you'll see that on line 7 it says that we have an error. So line 7 is there, okay, and it's saying in print name. We have the error that the name is not defined. So the error on this line is it doesn't know what name is. Okay, it has no access to a variable called name. So why might that be? Well, let's just have a look at this then. Hopefully you can see that we have used, for the first time, we've used a variable called name here. And then, so it's used within, or it's declared within this function, but then we try to use it in this function, or subroutine, try to call them subroutines. Now the problem with this is that when you have a variable that's declared or first used within a function, it has something called local scope. So it's only available within that function. So an analogy would be that, say, if you've got someone who's called Fiona in one room, in one classroom, doesn't stop you from having a Fiona in another classroom. They're entirely separate. So you can talk about Fiona, you know which Fiona you're talking about, unless you send Fiona to another classroom. Okay. Now, so what we need to do, we need to send the value of this to that other subroutine so we can actually make use of it. Because at the moment, its value stays local. It's got local scope. And by the way, local scope is really good because then you can't accidentally overwrite or use variables that you shouldn't be using. So what do we do? Well, if you have a look here, when we call print, we're not passing an argument. So normally, if you put something in there, like, for example, if you put a, then whatever the value of a is will then be passed to the print function. So we don't want to pass the value of a, so we're just going to have, say, name. Now, that's okay. It looks like it's okay. In fact, it's not quite okay, but it looks like it's getting okay because now we're passing that value. And so we pass the value of name. Hopefully, we're trying to anyway pass the value of name to the function. And yeah, so we've got this variable here. But actually, we haven't declared that positional argument. We've defined a function, but we haven't declared that it receives any arguments. So we need to put something in there. And at this point, also, actually, I want to say something. In fact, let's just try that because it's not going to work anyway. Enter your name. Oh, let's just let's say Barry. Oh, Barry 6. Barry. Okay. So now it says that print takes 0 positional argument. Print takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given because we put 1 there. Okay. So hopefully you're following me so far. Now, at this point, what I want to say about or talk about is something called overloading functions. As far as I'm aware, I'm no expert programmer in Python. I have done programming for a number of years now. Python is something I've taught at school, but it's not something I've ever done professionally, apart from as a teacher. But I have used other languages quite extensively, and in some languages you can do something called overloading. Now, I'll give you an example of overloading, which I believe that you can't do in Python. So let's say we wanted to define a subroutine. This is very hypothetical because I don't think it would work. But if we wanted to define a subroutine that say added two numbers, so let's call it add. Well, add numbers, okay? Add numbers. And so maybe it's going to add these two numbers, and then it's going to return a big. So hopefully you understand that. So we give it two numbers, we call add nums, and we say could do something like this. So we say add nums 2, 4, or whatever you want. Okay, so it's going to call the add nums function, and it's passing 2 by value. So that's 2 is going to be placed in A, and 4 is going to be placed in B, and it's going to return 2 plus 4. Okay, so straightforward so far. Some languages allow you to do overloading functions. So what that means is that you can have multiple versions of the function, or reuse the function name with, say, different parameters. So let's have a look at this. So maybe A, B, and C this time, and we'll return A plus B plus C. So hopefully you get where this is going now, that if, say, I call add nums and it's got 2 positional arguments, then it's going to use this one, because this one has 2 positional arguments. This one has 3 positional arguments, so this one's not going to be used unless, for example, I have something like that, in which case the compiler is going to know that that's the one that should be used and not that one. So by having a function and then redefining another defining another function which has a different number of arguments, a different type of arguments as well, this is what we call overloading. As I say, I don't think that we can actually do that in Python. So why am I going on about that? Well, the reason I'm going on about that is because in Python, when you define a function with the name of a function that's already used, you can no longer use the original one. It's replaced it. So most of you can be familiar that we've got a print function, a built-in function within Python, which we'll use, like to print hello world or whatever. But as soon as you have defined your own print function, you can no longer use that one. Whether or not it's using like different parameters and things, you can't, because you've now defined your own print function. So what are we going to do? Well, if we call print, we're going to be calling this print. We're not going to call the regular everyday Python print we always know and love. We're going to call this print. And so let's so if we do that, now by the way, this sometimes causes students confusion because we're using the same variable identifier with NAME in both cases. You think that it's the same variable. It's not. Okay, it's not the same variable at all, because remember that name is local to that one, and this name is local to this one. They're different because they both got their own scope. So sometimes it actually helps students to give, even though they're entirely separate scope, you might just find it easier to do something like that. And then you can see, okay, name. So I'm going to call the function called print, which we defined here. We're going to pass it the value of a variable, which in this case is called name. So the value goes, not the variable itself, but the value of that. And then that value then gets assigned to a new variable called n, and then we try to print it. But we don't try and print it. This is the other problem now, so it just gets worse and worse. So if you remember what I was talking about with overloading earlier, well, there is no overloading. So what's going to happen here is that we redefined print, and so now our version of the print function is the one and only version of the print function. So what happens is that now when we call print, we're not like printing that value to the screen, we're then calling our print function again, which then is going to call our print function again, which is just going to go around and around and around, and it's a recursive thing. It's going to keep on doing this and doing it and doing it until it can't do it anymore. If you want to do some more research on that, you need to look up recursion and stack as well. So, and also stack size would be something of interest as well. Right, so by the way, there is a good use for recursion, but I'm not going there in this video. So let's just try running this. What we're going to have this time, we'll call ourselves Harry. And yeah, we've got this error message. So you see this word recursion and also stack size or stack depth or something like that. You're going to see this error message. It's the problem with it going around and around, keep on calling itself, calling itself, and then at some point it bombs out. As I say, do your own research on that and find out what that actually means. So really, I think probably what the student wanted was not to get this function to call itself, but for this function to actually print to the screen. Now, so if you want to do that, the easy fix to this is to, rather than use the same name, because it was a bit of a dodgy choice actually, defining your own function called print, because you're going to want print, presumably you're going to want print. So I'm just going to call it like my print, or you could call it print2 or whatever you want, okay? And so now, when we've defined my print, then it's quite clear that when you then call print, we're actually calling the print that we always use in Python. Of course, you also need to update this. If you don't update this, what that's going to do, that's just going to print it straight to the screen, and it's not going to call that because, remember, our print function is now called myPrint. But if you want to call it that, if you want to call that function, then what you need to do is that. So that's now going to call myPrint function. It's going to pass by value whatever's contained in that variable, which then gets assigned to the parameter of n, which then is then going to be passed to the Python print function, that value there, and then hopefully that will get printed. Let's try it. So let's just save into your name. Okay, Brian, and there we go, Brian. Okay, and let's just confirm, hello, that we're actually calling that one. Let's just try this. Into your name. There we go, hello, Brian. Okay, so that's what it's doing. All right, so it is calling our myPrint function, which is then calling the Python function. Right, how did I do there? 12 minutes, probably a little bit longer than I wanted, but we covered a few things there, so do look it up if you want. It's not a GCSE sort of level thing, but recursion, if you're interested, stacks, stack depth, stack size, overloading. I think if you use, if I remember correctly from my days of doing Java, C++, they will support recursion, and I'm sure a whole host of other overloading and recursion for that matter. And yeah, might be of use if you want to extend your knowledge. That's it for the video then. Hope you found it useful.